What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Climb the Pocket channel. We are ready to give you our do not draft list for the 2021 season as of mid-July. Things will change, but as of ADP right now, we are going to give you 10 players not to draft on your fantasy football team unless you want to take last place. So you're going to want to listen to what we have to say, the analysis, the insight. Ryan, I don't know about you, but I'm going to give some insight as to why not to draft this player, but I'm always going to give some positives. But for these players, the negatives much outweigh the positives. So definitely excited to get into this list. We've given you the must-draft players. Now we're on to the must-not-draft players. And before we get into the video, I just want to make an announcement. Go follow the Climb the Pocket Twitter page right now. There's going to be an announcement coming soon for some upcoming giveaways. So you're not going to want to miss that. There's going to be instructions and all. You'll be able to win. Subscribe to the channel. You won't miss anything. We're going to be giving away some stuff in the next couple of weeks, so you're definitely going to want to check into that. Check out the website. Follow us on Twitter, Steve_CTP, and Ryan's at Bootleg Fantasy. Ryan, what's going on?
Well, Steve, as the unproblematic guy on Twitter and just in general, I like to avoid conflict, but this is going to be a video that will help everybody on guys that I don't really want to draft this year. I don't like crushing guys. Obviously, I'll eventually take these guys if they drop far enough, but their current ADPs looking kind of gross. The guys that we're touching on, and you have to avoid getting caught up in off-season hype, and I feel like a lot of these guys fall into the category of off-season hype, at least on my list. I feel like the guys that I'm telling you to stay away from are big off-season hype guys, and that's as to be expected in the fantasy realm. People get on board with certain players, somehow a train happens, and all of a sudden these guys' ADPs skyrocket, and just tone it down a little bit. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I'm just excited to hear who you don't want to draft, Steve.
Yeah, I guess off that, we'll go into the first one. You probably won't be too excited, but my first do not draft player is George Kittle on the San Francisco 49ers. I know he's one of your favorite players in the NFL. I mean, who is he not? Like, I think everyone loves George Kittle. Currently being drafted as the third tight end off the board, probably switching 2 and 3. Him and Waller kind of going in the same area depending on the league you're in. 32 overall and about, like I said, round 3. I feel like in most home leagues, he's probably going to go in round 2. Everyone gets that tight end love, and there's only a couple good ones this year that you really get excited about before you hit those middle rounds like the Hawkinsons and the Pitts and whatnot. But he's going off in the 3rd round. There's some negatives about him, and I know it might be recency bias, but he's coming off an injury-plagued season. George Kittle just plays that style of football where he's most likely going to get injured and miss a few games every year, and you're going to have to deal with that. And weighing that with having to draft him so early in your drafts, knowing you're going to, you'd like to draft a tight end that you can just stick in your lineup and never have to move, but if he misses 3 or 4 games and you miss out on that player in the 3rd round, that's going to negatively impact your team, and hopefully doesn't cost you a win or two, ultimately missing the playoffs. There's some quarterback questions looming. I actually think it'd be better if Jimmy Garoppolo was his quarterback because they have that connection. They've had a couple seasons where he had over 100 catches and over 1,000 yards. He's always been kind of not a big touchdown guy, at least in his four-year NFL career. I think he entered the league in 2017, averaging just over 3 touchdowns a game. They have new weapons in there, not necessarily this year. In the running back department they do, but they have Brandon Ayuk, and he's got a lot of upside this year. He's getting a lot of hype this offseason. Debo, if he's healthy all season, he's going to be in a factor. Mostert, Sermon, Gallman in the running back room. There's a lot of options here. And George Kittle's such a good team player. We know he's one of the best pass blocking tight ends in the league, if not the best. We know he's not going to get away from that. He's like the ultimate team guy. And he's going to have his yards, he's going to have his receptions, which ultimately, if that comes, he's going to be a top 5 tight end. But how early you have to draft him and the players you have to miss out on. I don't know if I'm going to be owning much Kittle this year unless he falls to round 4 or so in one of my leagues. So, there's not many tight ends that have similar ADP to him right now that I'd rather draft, but there are other players that I'd rather draft around him. Like, you're going to miss out receivers like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Allen Robinson, big name players that you can find tight end value later on. Nothing like these top 3 tight ends, but if you're drafting one of the big 3 this year, you really have to weigh your options. So George Kittle, probably not going to draft him this year. And since he's on my do not draft list, I'm telling you, you probably should look elsewhere unless he falls to the right spot in your draft. But right now, in the early third round, second round in a lot of your leagues, I would stay away from that. Ryan, who's your first do not draft?
Yeah, so my first is DAndre Swift, and he's going as running back 16, and he is going in an area where it's kind of a hit or miss running back pick, where you're hoping that he gives you running back one potential and upside, but he's going as running back two. Like I get it with DAndre Swift. He's a fun off-season name that people like throwing out there. They brought in Jamal Williams, which is a major concern. DAndre Swift's from a different regime. You can't really just go over that and think that's not a big deal. Like he wasn't brought in by the guys that are there. He's a great talent. Don't get me wrong. I love the talent. The Lions blow. They're a terrible football team. They're not going to surprise anybody. Dan Campbell is a gimmicky head coach who's trying to make a splash right now. That's all. Like he's talking about biting kneecaps or whatever. They're doing too much as an organization with Dan Campbell. I think that guy's a fraud. I mean, that's just my stance on him. But on Swift, 30% of his points were from touchdowns last year, and that's a lot of points from touchdowns from a team that I don't feel like is going to score too many touchdowns. I also see them behind in a lot of games, and I'll hear arguments for PPR upside for DAndre Swift. That's fine, but that's not a bonus for a running back. Like you want them to be up in games, regardless of how many PPR checkdown garbage time catches you think he's going to have. That's still a bad game script for a running back that you're expecting to, at minimum, be your RB2. I don't love that even a little bit. Chris Carson's going as RB21, and I think I'd rather have Chris Carson on my fantasy team just because I know that Seattle likes running the ball. And they're telling me that they want to run the ball, and they're a good team. So there's guys after DAndre Swift that I would rather draft. I'm going to touch on another one after this that I'd rather have over DAndre Swift at the end of this. I think you can probably guess who I'm going to say you should draft over DAndre Swift if you've watched a single video of ours. But, that's a guy I'd rather have too. I mean, if you know who it is and you want to comment that you know exactly who I'm going to tell you to draft over DAndre Swift, that'd be great for the algorithm. I'd appreciate that big time. But DAndre Swift, I'm sorry, you're local to me. I just can't find myself drafting him at such a premium price.
Yeah, definitely a popular choice this year. People are worried about him. We love the talent, but that Lions team, man, no one at receiver. Bring Jared Goff in, a downgrade at quarterback. There's not much looking for the positive game script there.
They were bottom 5 in rushing attempts last year.
Yeah.
Like, I know Adrian Peterson was there, and that's gross just in general for a running back and that you want to succeed in DAndre Swift. But they didn't run the ball last year, and I know there's a new regime. The players are pretty similar across the offensive line. So, dude, I hate fading Swift, but I can't see myself drafting him until they get better or he finds a new team.
Yeah, and real quick before I move on to the next player, people see him as a pass-catching back and whatnot, but JaMarr Williams is one of the best third-down running backs in the league. His pass blocking skills are unbelievable, so it doesn't really match perfectly. So definitely something weird going on, like you mentioned, with that regime and whatnot. They have a whole complete kind of different vision for DAndre Swift, and I don't know if they'll be able to run the ball with him early on effectively. Moving on to the next player, that's Chase Edmonds for the Arizona Cardinals. Kenyon Drake is out of town. And, there has been talk that Cliff Kingsbury has said Chase Edmonds can be a bell cow back. Not sure that's possible, or at least we haven't seen it. Can he handle the workload? This is kind of a crazy stat, but he's only had over 10 attempts 3 times in his career. So he's been just a career backup, a guy that's gotten in there, gets in the game to be a change of pace back, pretty much. He's only had this many rushing touchdowns in 3 seasons, 7. Only 5 receiving touchdowns in 3 seasons. 12 touchdowns in 3 seasons. I know he's been in the back seat, but that's not very encouraging. He's actually only had, I think, 2 100-yard games maybe, and it was just because the starter was out. So he's never it's never been like a 50-50 split with whatever running backs in town. He's always just been a guy that's, there. And I think they want to just continue to use him how they've been using him. That's why they brought in James Conner. James Conner is going to be the goal line back on this team. It just shakes out for him. James Conner's a bigger back. He's done the job before, and I would not be surprised if they're both mixed in between the 20s, and then James Conner's in there inside the 20. And that's just the way I see it. James Conner's not getting a lot of love. I preferably don't like to draft running backs in timeshares, But this one's just kind of sketchy because his ADP is RB26, so people are projecting him to be just a fringe, wide receiver, or running back 2, running back 3, right in the early running back 3 in round 5 and 6. There's other plays I'd rather take. I'd rather take a shot on Javonte Williams for Denver. There's been talk about him just starting over Melvin Gordon to start the year. That's much more encouraging than not knowing anything about Chase Edmonds, at least at this time in July, what his role is going to be. Raheem Mostert, it's like a guy that's got similar work to Edmonds. More work, obviously. He's been like the top back for his team, but we know 49ers like to use a lot of running backs, but he's way more efficient. He's more of a veteran, and I trust him a lot more. Taking Chase Edmonds here around 5 or 6, I don't know if he hits what his ceiling is, and if it's really going to help you like take a leap in your league. I'd rather go for a safer player or a player with like more upside. With Denver, I like their offensive line a lot better, and Javonte Williams, I think that would just be a much better pick at a similar ADP. So I'm going to avoid Chase Edmonds. Maybe I'll grab some James Conner. I think in your home leagues, he's probably going to slip pretty far, so it might be a good value. Like a 12-team league, if you catch James Conner in like round 10 or something like that, that's going to be something I'll probably be scooping up pretty often. But I will not be on the Chase Edmonds wagon this year. Moving on to your next player out of Denver.
Yeah, so the 3 next guys they're all in similar crowded situations where their ADP all of a sudden becomes too rich because due to different circumstances, the quarterback play is in question. I think Drew Lock's terrible. I think he's a terrible quarterback, so I'm not touching Noah Fant at tight end 8. Like, I understand after about tight end 5, you're just throwing darts and hoping you catch the one guy who's on his career year. I get that. But Noah Fant, I've been told, is going to be breaking out eventually. He still hasn't been the breakout tight end that I think most people expect, and no one really talks about the fact that we kind of expected Fant to be better than he is at this point. I know he's been a very solid tight end, and unfortunately the quarterback play has been abysmal for him, but the weapons on the outside plus KJ Hamler on the inside make it tough for me to see Noah Fant being like a game-changing tight end week to week. Like, there's going to be weeks where Fant might score 2 touchdowns. I get that. But Jerry Jeudy is unbelievable. Cortland Sutton's coming back. KJ Hamler is great. And Tim Patrick's no slouch either. There's way too many weapons there for them to have to rely solely on Noah Fant. I like Fant as a player. I don't like the ADP. If you get Logan Thomas at tight end 9, I feel just as good, if not better, because I feel like Noah Fant, even though they're one tight end slot away from each other, I feel like there's probably a round or 2 between Noah Fant and Logan Thomas. I feel like you can get value where you would take Fant and then you get Logan Thomas later. I feel pretty solid about that. I think that there's safety in Logan Thomas, where Noah Fant, you may be frustrated on a week-to-week basis. And, if Teddy Bridgewater comes in, I feel worse. I don't even know which tight end led the team in Carolina last year. Like, are we still waiting for Ian Thomas to break out? I have no idea. Couldn't tell you who the leading receiver at tight end was there. So, unfortunately, I'm fading Noah Fant again until his situation gets better. Hopefully it gets better soon because he comes from that great Iowa. Dude, we're crushing the Iowa tight ends already. I'm not telling you to not draft TJ Cronkinson. He's safe. He's safe this week. So, apparently we don't like Iowa, which is as far away from the truth as possible. Number 1 George Kittle fan, but Noah Fant, 2021, not great optics.
Yeah, it's Noah Fant for me. He's such an exciting player, but it's a quarterback play for me. I think he insert anyone, and even the weapons you mentioned. I think Noah Fant would take a big step. I think any other a competent quarterback would really love Noah Fant.
Yeah, once your boy gets traded there, Noah Fant may be tight end 4.
I thought we could get through present day football talk without talking about Aaron Rodgers, but we're gonna move on to just get out of that real quick. My next player not to draft is Zack Moss. And the reason I put Zack Moss on this list is because I've been listening to a lot of like industry drafts, the FSGA drafts and whatnot on Sirius Radio. A lot of people like talk about Zack Moss like they're excited to draft him. And I just don't really understand it. Certainly the guy has all the intangibles and whatnot, but he's pretty slow. He's on the Buffalo Bills. He's on the Buffalo Bills. Pretty sure they ran the most 4 wide receiver sets last year. They threw the ball a lot. Josh Allen's improvements only make me think that they're going to continue with that game plan this year because that is what worked. They kicked John Brown out. They brought Emmanuel Sanders in. To me, that's like a clean swap. They got Stephon Diggs in his second year with Josh Allen, and look how good they did in year one. They didn't really do anything to the running back room besides swap. They brought in Matt Breida, and who'd they kick out? TJ Yeldon. Yeah, not clean swap there. Nothing different.
No, Matt Breida's
yeah, we know you're a Matt Breida guy. This is a Matt Breida show for sure. Yeah, no. But he's been an injury prone back in the past. He was injured last year for a few games, and it kind of like, we thought Zack Moss had a lot of hype in the earlier part of last season, and then he got injured, and then Devin Singletary kind of took over the lead role instead of like a 50-50 towards the end of the season. Where in the last 4 games, he did have at least 12 carries in 3 of his last 4 games, so that was like certainly some upside. But he only saw 3 targets during that time. So like Devin Singletary is like the passing back during that time. It's just such a split like timeshare. I would say this backfield's like one of the definitions in the league of a timeshare, and I don't want to be a part of that for a team that's going to throw the ball so much. I don't know how much upside there is with him. Currently RB36, so he's the back end of the running back threes. 85th overall, finding him in round 7 or 8. That's too early for me. I mean, I would really only take a shot on him past round 10. Yeah. And maybe in your home leagues you'll go there. He's not like a household name. Maybe you can get him a little later. But because the leagues I play in are pretty competitive, people are pretty on top of things. Someone's going to draft Zack Moss earlier, and it won't be me. Similar ADP, Michael Carter. I would much rather Michael Carter. Today was the first bit of news I heard where Michael Carter's turning heads in training camp, or to the coaches, like they're impressed by him. And I think more and more of that happens. I think his ADP rises, and they're ultimately not in the same range when it comes to draft day. But right now, if you drafted, I'd rather take Michael Carter. I'd rather take a shot on Trey Sermon. I'd rather take a shot on James Conner, as I mentioned, who I think you can get a round or 2 later. So those are guys I'd much rather have. I don't see any hype in Zack Moss at all.
No.
I just don't think the Buffalo run game is something you want to get invested in. Shady McCoy's not there anymore. It's been a few years.
The number one runner for the Buffalo Bills is Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to change. They don't want to protect Josh Allen like that. They see that as an asset. He is their goal line guy. He's so big. It works for them. I mean, they're a great team with Josh Allen running the ball at the goal line.
3 years, how many rushing touchdowns does Josh Allen have?
If I had to guess, definitely more than 20.
He's got 25.
Yeah.
8, 9, and 8, respectively. It's tough to have a fantasy running back when the quarterback is scoring all. I mean, we saw it with Cam Newton for years. He just likes scoring touchdowns, and Josh Allen's the same way. So I completely agree. Zack Moss is maybe one of the most frustrating sells in fantasy football, where people just continue to tell me that Zack Moss is going to be a thing. Dude, Matt Breida could end up being the running back 1 in Buffalo in no time. Like, if he stays healthy, we've seen Matt Breida be good. I mean, have we really seen Zach? I think there was one game where Moss scored twice, and that was the only time where I was like, you know what, Zack Moss might be good.
I mean, maybe we're being hard on him, but it's just, the reason I put him on this list, like I mentioned, I'm just seeing so much hype. You see a lot on Twitter. You see people talking about it on shows. Zack Moss, can he be the guy? I'm like, what makes you think that Buffalo was about to run the ball a lot this year? Yeah. Like, even if he gets 12 carries a game, is that really that much? Especially when Josh Allen's taking half the goal line carries. It's not that much.
For a slow guy.
Yeah, for a guy that's slow. He doesn't have breakaway speed. He's not going to get you a 70-yard touchdown from the 30. Like, it's not going to happen. So
yeah. Here's a hot take for you, Steve. They're going to draft a running back in the first 3 rounds next year. I mean, I don't see how they don't.
I was surprised they didn't this year.
I
think everyone was.
Honestly.
Yeah. But I don't know. We'll move on, but I'm not drafting Zack Moss. He's definitely not on any of my teams. Moving on to your next guy. This is probably one of the hotter takes in the show.
Yeah. I don't – so here's the thing. I love the talent. I wanted him as a Philadelphia Eagle, and – I got old takes exposed for loving the fact that he was going to be an Eagle in the 12 minutes where the Eagles had the 6th pick and somebody moved back, and that's JaMarr Chase. I love the talent. I love the situation. The ADP is kind of okay, but a rookie wide receiver the year after Justin Jefferson from the same college, I get the hype, right? And it's all well and good, and if it's a dynasty, I love JaMarr Chase for the next 15 years. He's an unbelievable wide receiver. He was better in college than Justin Jefferson. I understand it. But the reason they brought JaMarr Chase in was to be buddy with their franchise quarterback, Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow is coming off one of the most gruesome knee injuries I've seen in a couple of years. If they throw the ball aggressively with Joe Burrow out the gate, they're the dumbest organization in football. They need to protect Joe Burrow at the beginning of the year as much as they possibly can.
Is this a buy or like draft Joe Mixon statement? Is that what this is?
Dude, it's always a draft Joe Mixon statement. He's a bell cow and nobody wants to talk about it.
All right.
But I love JaMarr Chase's talent. JaMarr Chase he's not a guy that I want to draft, but week 5 or 6 where he might have a couple weak games because the Bengals go conservative a little bit, because the future of Joe Burrow is a lot more important than week 2 in 2021. You go out and try a trade for JaMarr Chase. I mean, we've seen it before with guys that come out of college that had weird starts to their careers. Like A.J. Brown was on people's waiver wires his rookie year, and then all of a sudden was putting up 100-yard games. There's times and places to get in on guys, and I don't think the draft is where you get in on JaMarr Chase. The talent around him is unbelievable. I mean, Tyler Boyd might be the most disrespected wide receiver in the NFL, and T. Higgins put up a season comparable to Chase Claypool, and all I hear about is Chase Claypool. You know, the guys there are great. They don't have to force the ball to JaMarr Chase if they don't need to. And I mean, Joe Burrow was on pace for like 700 passing attempts last year. If they go out there and Joe Burrow gets hurt after throwing 35, 40 times in a game, the entire staff should get fired. I like JaMarr Chase a lot. Obviously, if it was between him and Devonta Smith, I wanted JaMarr Chase, and that's saying something because I love Smith a lot. But the wide receiver 26 ADP is a little rich for me because you're banking on him being a wide receiver 2 essentially for your team. So, I can't take him at that price.
I'm kind of worried about Joe Burrow. Just a few weeks ago, he was on my must-draft list, but I'm pretty sure his ADP since then has just skyrocketed even more. He's getting drafted as like QB9. And the things you mentioned, if they come out here, I was worried when they drafted Chase, just thinking about that. This has got to be a future play, and if it's not, I'm worried about him because they cannot just go out there and roll him out and throw a bunch of passes. I know that's what the fantasy community wants. Like, oh, these 3 wide receivers, Joe Mixon, high-flying offense. It's not smart for the Bengals to do that right away. They got to let their quarterback and franchise player get healthy. It's worrisome, but apparently people think if they are throwing the ball, it's going to Chase since he's the earliest drafted Bengals wide receiver right now. And they really didn't. And there's a lot of talk about this. They really didn't need him. You know, T. Higgins was a great rookie. He had a great rookie season, and Tyler Boyd is really coming into his own. As like really the only guy there since AJ Green was getting older and whatnot, and now he's gone. So they had a pretty good situation, but they decided to go the route of the wide receiver, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully Joe Burrow gets healthy and he's healthy to start the season and they don't run him into the ground. Moving on to my next player, a guy that hasn't got as much hype this offseason, I think because the hype's kind of gone, but I'm still staying off him, and that's Marquise Brown. Currently going as wide receiver 47, so like a back-end wide receiver for 120 overall, around 10. It's certainly, I'm not telling you to draft this guy or not to draft him early, or you're not going to draft this guy early. You're going to draft him apparently in round 10, but I'm just not drafting him at all. I wouldn't want him as my wide receiver 4. There's other guys I like around the time, like Laviska Shenault, Antonio Brown, Mike Williams, Michael Gallup, Marvin Jones. I think all those guys have a better season than Hollywood Brown. They drafted Rashad Bateman, who I think is more of an X receiver, and he's much more of a red zone threat. And Brown, a big play guy, right? I don't really understand that because he's only had a couple, I think 2 100-yard games in his first 2 seasons, just 2. You know, we picture all these long touchdown passes that he's gotten in his career, but really those haven't happened. Lamar Jackson needs to improve in the passing game, and although the team says they want to, throw the ball more, it's going to be very difficult for the Ravens to get away from their strongest point on offense, and that's running the ball, specifically with Lamar Jackson. They can say all they want, how they're going to really up the passing game this year. They want to be more efficient. I don't know if Lamar ever becomes as efficient as he was in his rookie season throwing the ball. And that wasn't with that much volume. He was extremely efficient. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy like let him throw more and he'll get better. They're going to end up running the ball because that's what works, and I see that happening a lot more. And I don't think Brown's as good as we thought he was. There's a reason they drafted another receiver. They were missing that part of the offense. Maybe drafting Rashad Bateman helps out Marquise Brown, but I just don't think there's enough volume. There's a run-first offense. It always will be while Lamar's there. And I think Mark Andrews is the number one target, and I think Rashad Bateman's pretty good, and I can see him passing him up by the time this season's over, with a lot of hiccups in between Brown and Bateman as far as which wide receiver to play in that offense. I'm sticking away from it. Like I said, not a lot of risk here. But a guy I'm not taking as my wide receiver 4. I don't want him as my first bench player.
Yeah, I mean, with Brown, they drafted Tylan Wallace, too, in the 4th round.
Yeah, didn't even mention him.
Yeah, he's nasty. And Marquise had a weird year last year with the Ravens where he was very clearly upset with the organization. I forget what the tweet was like, why do you have soldiers if you never use them? Like, he's
Was he talking about Trace McSorley?
Happy. No.
I'm just kidding.
I think he was talking about himself, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, if you could toss Trace McSorley in there, he might have done a little thing or two. I mean, Trace McSorley is the greatest player of all time in Madden, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I with Hollywood Brown, I think he just kind of needs a reset. Like, he's not in the same category to me as John Ross. Obviously, John Ross was an all-time bust seemingly. Yeah. And he's resetting with the Giants, right?
The Giants.
And yeah, which is going to be the next team I talk about.
Pick a team for Marquise to go to.
I mean,
right now, quarterback, perfect situation. I know it's right on the spot, but I guess mostly think about the quarterback.
Is the cop-out answer the Chiefs? If he was on the Chiefs, he'd be unbelievable.
That would be cool because I think that offense would really work with 2-speed guys. That's what they like to do.
Or, Buffalo would be sick. Or,
yeah.
If you put him on the Packers,
yeah,
pretty good.
Mentioning the Packers as a destination for free agents like that is just kind of, or just anyone. It doesn't hurt. It's a waste of time to talk about because it never would happen.
So you're in the anger stage, the 5 stages of grief. So that's fine. I get that.
We can do a whole show on Aaron Rodgers if you're interested. We can do a little live stream on Twitter.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
I like him.
St. Brown and all the guys that were supposed to be half decent, Allen Lazard, and you made him one wide receiver. I feel like it would be Hollywood Brown.
All right, I don't want to cry on camera. All right, we're going on to the next player. I don't want to. Yep. Right, you can't do it. All right, move on to your guy, Miles Sanders, who he's on this do not draft list. Interesting because you took him in our last mock draft.
I know I did take Miles Sanders in the mock, and listen. It hurts for me to tell you not to draft Miles Sanders because I want to love Miles Sanders. He's the guy here. He's our running back, but I don't even know if he's our running back at this point. Like the Lions, there's a new regime. The new regime brought in some heads, and Kenny Gainwell, he's going to be a significant third down guy. Miles Sanders had 7 or 8 drops last year, which was second to Phillip Lindsay. And he just can't get it going in the pass game. And unfortunately for him, the Eagles have relied on Darren Sproles and guys like that. Boston Scott's seen a couple third down roles in games. They haven't really given Sanders the opportunity to be a true third down back. And unfortunately at this point, I think it's kind of stunted him as a running back. We expected him to be a complete back, and he just can't get it going as somebody out of the backfield who catches passes. Granted, Wentz, he was high on a lot of passes to Sanders out of the backfield. I don't know if that was miscommunication where Sanders was in the wrong spot, but I don't like his ability to stay on the field for 3 downs. And Sanders has been probably one of the most frustrating guys in fantasy to own the last 2 years. Last year he was RB 7 before the season. Everyone was extremely high on Miles Sanders. And he was only really a home run hitter where he wasn't giving you solid carries back to back to back. He would go for -2, 3 yards, and then a 60-yard touchdown, and then he'd disappear. I know he was on your teams, and you'd be this guy's the greatest running back of all time if he hits a home run. I don't. As much as I don't, you're kind of blaming Miles Sanders more than I would. I just think that Philadelphia offense was just a complete dumpster fire last year. It was just awful, and I do see some potential
Miles Sanders a potential good draft pick at his ADP, but I still don't know. I'm in your boat. I don't know if I could trust him
Yeah.
again.
So I'm a tough lover, Steve. You burned me a couple times, and
Yeah,
I'm out. I'm out on you.
that's
And
fine.
the fact that they drafted Kenny Gainwell to be the pass catching back, they still have Boston Scott.
Yeah,
They brought in another guy that I love, Kerryon Johnson, who may or may not make it out of training camp. It's interesting to me that they're looking for other options at running back instead of just saying Miles Sanders is our guy. We can trust him 100%. He's going to be far and away the guy that leads the backfield. They haven't really even there's teams that are committing to their running backs already.
Buffalo, as we mentioned,
Yeah,
they didn't
exactly.
take up running back, and Miles Sanders is possibly getting work
That's
eaten
what I mean.
into.
And the guy that's getting taken at RB20 was just committed to today. He's going to get 20 touches a game. That's
Yeah,
David Montgomery.
yeah.
And if you said that earlier when I told you to comment, congratulations. Subscribe to the channel, and you have a chance to win something when Steve drops something. That's all I'm saying. I really do think that Miles Sanders has the talent. I don't know what's stopping him from bringing it all together. The offensive line should be healthier, but the fact that if you draft Weird, he could be your running back one. He's going as RB18. He's at least your RB2, and he's going in the top 3 rounds. I don't love that. I feel like there's guys that I'd prefer to have at other positions in the first 3 rounds. So, unfortunately, I'm not touching Miles Sanders. Is he my Joe Mixon? Maybe. He could be my Joe Mixon, and somebody could get a value with Miles Sanders. But being risk averse in the first the first 4 rounds or so, I'm not touching Miles Sanders. And hopefully I eat my words and he's scoring touchdowns for my Philadelphia Eagles. But right now, I can't commit to him.
Yep, he will root for him. He won't draft him. All right, moving on to the next player. A guy that probably finds this list every year for me, at least in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. ADP, wide receiver 28, just outside the wide receiver 2s, 68th overall in the 6th round. Guys, when are we going to admit that Odell Beckham is not Odell Beckham of New York with Eli Manning? When? We understand he was a freak. He made a sweet catch. It was awesome. It was great. He had some good seasons in New York. I think he had 10 plus touchdowns in his first 3 seasons. And then he got injured in New York. And then he came to Cleveland. And then it wasn't great. And then he got injured. He's only played 82 games out of his first 112 games in his first 7 years. 82, that's a lot of missed time. Guys, that's a lot of missed time, and a lot of it is recent. A lot of it in his last 4 years. I don't have that number, but in his last 4 years, I'm sure the majority of that is in that time. He just hasn't been the same on the Browns, and people will say, yo, Steve, he has been on the Browns, but he hasn't really had that time to connect with Baker. The first year was with Freddie Kitchens, and they were awful. The game plan was awful. It's his first year. It's a whole new offense. This next year is a whole new offense. Then he gets injured. This has got to be the year. We want to see Odell Beckham making one-hand catches again, going for 1,312. It's not happening. It's not happening. I have very little confidence this guy stays on the field for 13 or 14 games. I have very little confidence. Even what we saw last year, we saw a few games. It was great. It looked like he was clicking with the offense, doing some fun things, throwing the ball. This is a run-first offense. A run-first offense like this with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb does not bode well for a number 1 wide receiver. And he's not being drafted like one. I'm not saying he is. But I'd rather take a chance on other guys who have upside that I think can stay on the field more consistently. Like T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool, Juju, a guy you mentioned, JaMarr Chase. I'd rather take a shot on those guys than go back to the same old guy that's burned me year after year. The investment is much lower this year than it has been in any year drafting Odell. But that's not going to fool me. He will not be on my fantasy teams, and he shouldn't be on yours. Moving on. Yeah. Wow. What that was like a closing statement to some sort of
I mean,
thing. I don't know.
You're all over it. I mean, as an Odell Beckham Jr. lover, because he won me a fantasy championship. I have to admit that he doesn't even cross my mind as somebody who I want to draft. He's
name value. He's name value. You want him on your team as your wide receiver 3 because it looks sweet in your starting lineup.
I don't even know if it looks sweet anymore, which is crazy. All of a sudden he's just when you would draft like old man Jordy Nelson on like the Raiders. Like, how did that happen all of a sudden? Like, why is he just washed? Like, I get the injuries, and like Baker is fine. He's a fine quarterback. He's not Eli for stats, but it's painful that Odell is just fallen so far out of graces. And there's gonna be like a game or two where you're just like, oh, Odell's back, but like you watch his entire 2021 season, I'm sure it's not going to be what you want it to be. And he should be on a lot of benches this year. So it's going to be interesting to see where Odell finds himself, and if he has a bad year, like I don't know if you can continue to commit to that guy, you know?
No, definitely not. And I've already hinted this next player because I didn't know we were going to continue to talk about OBJ. I should have known that, but he's been on the screen for a while here. That's Kenny Galladay for the Lions. He's your last do not draft the Lions. I meant the Giants, and he's your last do not draft player this year.
Yeah, he is. And I mean, Giants fans are under this haze that I have found myself under recently as well. And they're assuming that you can take a couple stats from Daniel Jones and it kind of just makes him a better quarterback going into this year. Like, he was great like throwing the deep ball, but like he turned the ball over like 3 times a game last year. Like I had the same blind optimism with one Carson Wentz, and it's great until you get pie in your face that Daniel Jones isn't a good quarterback. Like, you can die on the Daniel Jones hill, but the fact that he's not that good, and the fact that there's 1,000 weapons in New York for him to succeed, and Saquon's coming back, I just don't love Kenny Galladay's ADP of wide receiver 24. Like, Sterling Shepard is a solid wide receiver. Darius Slayton, good wide receiver. They brought in John Brown. Evan Ingram had like the worst year a tight end possibly could have had, and he was like electric as a rookie. And people all of a sudden just think Evan Ingram blows. Evan Ingram's a good player, and if the Giants just don't want to have Evan Ingram, I would gladly take him in Philadelphia. He's a good option. I mean, he's going to be in the middle of the field. And the assumption that Daniel Jones is just going to take this step that makes the Giants a great offense is a bit presumptuous. And, I like the pictures of, like, Daniel Jones, like, standing next to Kenny Galladay with their arms crossed outside MetLife. That's fun, It's fun to see these guys, get on the same page. But when the rubber meets the road, Daniel Jones isn't a good quarterback. Like, I understand that you want him to be good, but he's got to cut down on a lot of things. And the fact that Saquon Barkley's back, they're not just all of a sudden going to be like a super pass first team. You give Saquon Barkley the ball, good things happen. And I think that the Giants coaching staff should know that they should run their offense through Saquon. I mean, all of those things together makes it tough for me to say Kenny Galladay is my wide receiver too. Because there's going to be games where you might have 2 catches for 24 yards and you lose because your wide receiver 2, who you need to put up points, doesn't put up points because Daniel Jones has a bad game that's rainy at MetLife and they had to give the ball to Saquon 26 times. I like Kenny Galladay's talent. He thrived with Matt Stafford, but Danny Dimes isn't Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to tag some Giants fans in the Twitter comments. We gotta let them know. Might have to clip this one and tag some people because there's gonna be some angry people out there, man.
And they're the same people that told me that Carson Wentz, when I gave them advanced stats of like
I love this little divisional heat,
small window for that Wentz was throwing into, and he like all the fun stats are fun. But you can't look at me and tell me Daniel Jones is like an elite quarterback. I'm sorry. And the fact that there's like 1,000 weapons in New York where they didn't even really need Kenny Galladay, if we're being completely honest, makes it tough for me to draft Galladay, who was, a touchdown machine in Detroit, where I don't even like. He was like he was like what? He was a double-digit touchdown scorer a couple times, and he was Babytron, and everything was peaches and cream in Detroit. I just don't see that happening when you've got Saquon Barkley. And then, maybe the Giants fans will ease up on me for saying that they should be a run first team with a top 3 running back. I mean, that's a crazy thing to say, I guess.
But Ryan, his first few games in the NFL were great, and he had that big run last year where he tripped. It's
He-
so
oh,
he's
I
good.
was at the
All right.
bar against my Eagles, and that was like the greatest thing that's ever happened in my
Yeah,
entire life.
I'm sure that was fun. Guys, there you have it. We're not going to keep rambling on. Those were our do not draft players this year. And like I said, go ahead and draft them, but you're going to lose your fantasy football league if you do. So take a look at the video again, see what we had to say. If you're drafting one of these players now in a lot of your drafts, think about it because I don't think you're going to want them on your team come season time. As I mentioned earlier, if you were sticking around, there is a giveaway going on very soon. It's going to be some autographed memorabilia, something you're definitely not going to want to miss. You're going to need to be subscribed to the channel, and you're going to want to go check out the Climb the Pocket Twitter at Climb the Pocket for the official rules on how to enter for that giveaway, so you're not going to want to miss it. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content today. You're not interested in the giveaway, which you're crazy if you don't want it because it's some good stuff that's coming out. Comment on the video who you not drafting this year and like the video. We really appreciate it. We will see you guys next week. Peace out.